The Mexico Major is just days away now, and I've got to say off the rip, it feels so good to have our regular scheduling of international competition back with regular tournaments throughout the year. No more domestic tournaments means every major win is much more valuable as you had to take down the best of the best to secure it. In this video, I thought I'd do a quick summary on each team competing and their story, along with their recent form and how it will affect which teams I think will progress from each group to the knockout stages. Hit the like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you like what you're seeing on the channel and want to keep up to date with future videos, and comment down below which teams you're looking forward to watching. Now with all that said, let's jump into Group A, starting off with BDS. BDS are still that scary, dangerous team we've known them to be over the last few years. However, this season they have not been as untouchable in EUL as they used to be, and particularly since the 6th Invitational have struggled to cement themselves as a top 2 team in Europe, finishing in an underwhelming 4th place spot in the stage just gone. However, at different stages throughout this stage, their individual players have stepped up with big performances, especially the more unspoken about players like Rafał have had some high impact games to put points on the board for the Frenchman. What they will need now is some well-rounded performances where every player is having a good performance at the same time, as a 20 kill performance from Shaiko or 1vx clutches from Bride will not be enough to overcome many of the other teams at the major currently in some of the best forms of their lives. Team 1. Team 1 have been one of the most impressive and improved teams this season across all regions. This roster was a mix and match of middle of the pack BR6 teams from the previous season, and therefore were not expected to have such a big impact as they have. They showed the world that they were here to play with a decent 9th place finish at SI in their first international tournament as a roster, and were actually the ones to eliminate the previous world champions Spacestation Gaming out of the tournament. By far their standout player has been Alamau, who has tore teams apart with the shotgun SMG loadout, along with playing various different operators as a flex on attack. He led his team to the finals of the Copper Elite 6 in Stage 2 in a close loss to world champions Ninjas in Pyjamas. If they can keep up with NIP on top of their game, then they only need to continue this level of performance to have a good major run. Soniqs. Soniqs have been another team similar to Team 1 that built a new roster at the start of the season and have really outshined the world's and their own expectations. IGL Super is the final remaining player of the previous Soniqs roster, as they chose to bring in 4 players from the ex-E United roster who were very talented but underperforming for various reasons. But since their transfer and being in a new environment, Soniqs have flourished and firmly cemented themselves as a top 4 team this season in the NAL. MVP of NAL Stage 1, Grixer, was front and centre in them finishing 2nd place in the first split, and the rest of the roster picked up the slack for him in a more quiet Stage 2, helping them secure their Mexico spot with a 3rd place finish in the 2nd split just gone. I think this team is one of the most well-rounded teams in Tier 1, as they all seem to be on the same wavelength and clearly have really good comms. This is however their first international tournament as a full roster, and outside of potential scrims haven't faced international competition yet, so they will need to make sure nerves and pressure don't overwhelm them, along with being ready to adapt if they want to make a deep tournament run. Cyclops. After a 17th place finish at the 6th Invitational, some teams would have considered making changes to their roster. However, Cyclops Gaming chose to stick it out and build further, committing to their project. Many of the best teams in the world have taken this approach, with arguably the best example being Ninjas in Pyjamas, who decided to stick it out as a 5-man roster, eventually being rewarded with a world championship. Players Anitun, Suzu C, Gator Raider, Black Ray and Gator have been together since latest 2019, with some of the roster even being there from a year earlier. And since their disappointing SI run, things have looked positive, as they secured 2 first place finishes in Stage 2, collecting 1st in the APAC North Division and another 1st place in the Japan League. As we know though, region success does not guarantee international success, as every team present is representing the best of the best in their region, and they will need to be at the top of their game to not face an early exit at Mexico. This is a really hard group to call, like most of the groups to be honest. Unfortunately, I don't see Cyclops being able to overcome the amount of quality spread between the rest of Group A, so that leaves us with BDS, Team 1 and Soniqs. As a BDS fan, it would be easy to insta-pass them through the knockouts, but as I mentioned, they've been a lot more vulnerable in the last few months than usual, so it really wouldn't surprise me if Team 1 or Soniqs were able to defeat them. However, I just feel with each player showing this stage that they can put the team on their back, that they have all the individual ingredients to make it out of this group, so long as they work well together all at once. So they're through for me. As for Team 1 and Soniqs, it's very close and I can't wait to see these two face each other, but personally I feel like if I had to pick, then the favour lies with Team 1, as they've done an excellent job in Stage 2 of the BR6, and their second place in the Copa Elite 6 is very encouraging. Also, as mentioned before, this will be the first time Soniqs play international teams in an official game, with this as another added hurdle that Team 1 don't have to worry about, especially with Team 1 showing they can handle that, defeating G2, DZ, Cloud9 and SSG all at the Invitational, so I think it will be them who proceeds to the playoff, saying goodbye to the Susquehanna Soniqs. But look out for both these teams though, as this will be one of the most important battles of the group stage. Over to Group B, and we kick off with Spacestation Gaming. SSG have done what you could describe as a 360-degree path of progression. They went from 2020 World Champions to still being strong in the full 2020 season, but after losing Canadian at the start of the 2021 season, they completely bombed in Stage 1, finishing 7th, and even with Canadian's brief return for the 2021 Invitational, didn't fare well, being knocked out in the first round of the playoffs after limping over the line in the group stages. Their future success seemed to be on a knife edge, as the 4 long-standing players could have easily gone their separate ways, but they didn't. And the luck finally tilted in their favour, as player Hot and Cold, who had been dropped from DZ and tore it up with Mirage in Stage 1, was their new acquisition, as it seemed they had finally found their correct 5th man that they could build with. And since then, they have looked in some of the best shape they have ever been in, soaring up to first place in Stage 2 with flying colours. Hot and Cold has hit the ground running, being one of the best players in the NAL for a second stage in a row. And the other 4 players look like they are in a good space mentally and are shining, combined with the great strategy we know and love from SSG. So they're set well heading into this major, and for me are one of the favourites to take the whole tournament themselves. NAVI. Since winning Pro League Season 10 finals in 2019, up until this season, NAVI haven't been able to recapture that same magic in Tier 1. They have made many changes since then, trying out young and upcoming players and attempting to reshape their playstyle, but more often than not, their biggest downfall was struggling with inconsistency. We could see them silence some of the best teams in Europe with frags and impact plays all across the board, and then follow it up with devastating losses to lower rated teams, even occasionally non-Tier 1. With their star players sometimes just not turning up. But the most recent inauguration of their roster seems to have been just what they were looking for. They brought in experienced players secretly, along with 2 more up and coming players, Blur and Nath. And honestly, they have shined, with Blur particularly playing as if he had been in Pro League as long as someone like Doki has. These 2 were the main factor that led them to finishing first place in Stage 1 of this season, along with the rest of the team showing their worth as they secured 3rd in this stage just gone. We didn't get to see them at SI 2021, and because of that, I'm actually so pumped to see how this exciting roster will perform against the best in the world from all regions. And finally, we have FURIA, who have surprised many people with their strong season in the BR6 and at the Invitational. Highs, Lender, Miracle, Fantasy and Rare were relatively unknown outside of LATAM on the international scene before 2021, but their ability to pull off massive upsets and hold their own against the best of the best that Siege has to offer has led them to become fan favourites around the world. It was amazing seeing them at SI, where this team playing at their first international LAN were able to silence long-standing and experienced teams at LAN such as DarkZero and G2. But I think the moment I fell in love with this team was in Stage 1 of the BR6, where Fantasy ran around Oregon basement with Ash, collecting a 4K and near ace with the R4C and pistol against Ninjas in Pyjamas.
So many shields and ADSs that they need yet to burn, and the drop comes through from Fancy, finds the kill over onto Kamikaze despite being in the Grismot mine. Got some information as to the whereabouts of his next victim and looks to push his way all the way on into sight. Grabs a second, he's on a tear. Nothing can stop him at this point, perhaps, but there is a player that is going to be pushing him from Freezer. He's got line of sight through the drone hole but can't make the shots count. Instead goes for the swing, finds the kill onto the Psycho, second on Torpedo, and is he going to get the final one? No, he gets it snatched away from him by Miracle, but such a close attempt.
Coach Twister has said for a long time, even when they were struggling in 2020, finishing at the bottom of the BR6, that it's been a joy for him to work with young upcoming players, and you can tell this to be true as they have got better and better, and by the way they play, really seem to be enjoying their siege at the moment. As for who will proceed to the playoffs, an easy start for me is that Space Station will go through at least finding second out of the 3, as not only are they in great form, but all of these players, Hot and Cold included, have more than enough LAN experience. Plus, with Knights having to drop out the tournament, the strategy is bound to shine as they have one less team to do VOD review and prep for. Now for the harder call between NAVI and FURIA. As a UK boy, I would like to see NAVI do well in this tournament, and I think they can. And honestly, at the top of their game between these 2, I think NAVI are a better team than FURIA. But maybe controversially here, I think if I'm forced to pick, there is a chance that FURIA might be the ones to go through. Most of the NAVI players, apart from Saves, have not played at all at international LAN or not for over 2 years. So much has changed about Siege since then, and as we know, LAN is a different build to online, with different guns and playstyles being more effective, so it might take a little too long for them to settle into the LAN playstyle before they can avoid being knocked out in the groups. And with no Knights, there is no easy game for them to settle into their rhythm. They will need to hit the ground running to make it to the playoffs. Also, they haven't been in as great form as they were in stage 1 with their first place finish, as they had to scrap to earn top 4 this stage. FURIA, on the other hand, have been playing in the strongest region in the world, pushing the big boys of the region to the limits in close overtime games or victories. They have played more tournaments than any NAVI player has this season and have shown that on the biggest stage of Siege, they are able to more than just compete, but actually defeat established teams, even at the playoff stages. It really wouldn't surprise me if either of these teams were to make it through, but trying to be reasonable and unbiased, I think that there's a chance that FURIA could be the ones to make it to the playoffs, sending NAVI home. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Over to Group C, starting off with the most anticipated team of the tournament, Ninjas in Pyjamas. This group of players, Julio, Psycho, Kamikaze, Muzi and Pino, started this project in 2018, with the latter two players being brought in 2019, and for many years they were chasing the success of Team Liquid and FaZe, as they were the only two teams in the region to have any type of international success. But it was these 5 players on NIP who led the LATAM region from being seen as one step behind EU and NA, to now being the best region in all of competitive Siege. They managed to fight their way through the lower bracket of the 2020 Invitational, making it to the final and falling victim to a comeback from SSG, leaving NIP feeling massively hurt at coming so close to glory but ultimately not being able to get over the line. However, they showed that having belief in your own ability and a project can be so valuable. They knuckled down in the following year and worked on improving, and even a few weeks before the 2021 Invitational were not nailed on to make it to the final again after having shaky league form. But what goes on behind closed doors can often be very important, as seemingly out of nowhere they ploughed through the last Invitational with an undefeated upper bracket run, then taking down their Brazilian counterparts Team Liquid in the grand finals. They are therefore the best ranked team in the world and do not look to be slowing down, as they bounced back in stage 2 of the BR6 and then went on to win their second tournament in just a few months, finishing first in the Copa Elite 6. If they can keep up this great form, they are primed to make a deep run at the major, as when this team are firing, they are one of the most scary, unplayable teams in all of Siege. DarkZero. DZ are an interesting team to look at. They undoubtedly have the quality to succeed on the international stage, but for various reasons, have never been able to get over the line. The closest they came was a second place in Season 10 Pro League Finals, losing out to the previously mentioned NAVI. But since then, they've had much more experience and even a domestic title in there with a NAL major victory from last season, giving them the taste and understanding of how it feels to be a winner. Like many teams in the NAL, they struggled in Stage 1 of this season and the Invitational like many big North American teams, but like many others, rebounded very well in Stage 2 and secured a top 4 spot. Their star player Hyper is in great form right now, and when he is playing like this, he is easily one of the best players in the world. They've had many overtime matches, but in a best of 3 format, along with the return of highly experienced player BC, this tournament could easily be one of their best showings they've had as a org. G2. G2 are probably the most storied team in Siege history, and easily the most successful. Success and hopes of a legacy of teams like Ninjas and Pyjamas are modelled off of what G2 were able to do. However, they haven't been able to reach the dizzying heights in the last few years that they were used to. They've tried sticking it out with the World Championship players, making super teams, and even adding new faces to work under the more experienced players on the roster. But nothing great lasts forever, and it took 2 years of chopping and changing for G2 to realise that this was the position they now found themselves in. Over the last 2 stages, we saw the complete removal of the Dynasty players, as players like Pengu and Kanto said goodbye, and things have started to look slightly better. They have a mixture of inexperienced and experienced players at this level, and so of course they deserve time. And Pro League champion Citizen and Australian Fnatic import Virtue have been the front runners of this new team's recent form. But what I love so much about this team is the balance they now have. Hungary, Kayak and Yonka have done a great job at filling the roles needed to execute their strats, while still allowing Citizen and Virtue to flourish on the more aggressive roles. Keep an eye on this team at the major, as with flex players like Hungary on their roster, they are guaranteed to bring some interesting strats to Mexico. DAMWON. DAMWON as an org are new to Rainbow Six Siege, only entering the scene this year as they picked themselves up a Korean roster to play in the APAC region. And things have started strongly for them, as they took 2 second places and a first in 3 Korean Open tournaments, following it up recently with a unified victory over the whole APAC region in the APAC playoffs a few weeks ago, convincingly beating Elevate 2-0 in the finals. Honestly, I'm not very familiar with this team, but I know that they have 3 very strong teams in their group, all in great form, so they will need to channel that great form of their own in a LAN environment to have any chance of making it to the playoffs. In this group, I feel confident to say that NIP have shown more than enough since SI to top the group or at least minimum finish second. And unfortunately for DAMWON, I feel that they are too inexperienced and fresh to this level of competition to be able to topple either G2 or DZ. And that is where the meat and the bones of this group lies. Those two are such an excellent match for each other, not only when it comes to fragging potential, but also strategy and prep. Both DZ and G2 are notoriously known for succeeding when having time in advance to prep and VOD review their opponents, and honestly I can't wait to dive into the match replays when the major's over and see the details of what these two teams have prepared for each other. They have also both recently reshaped their roster since the Invitational, so I think whichever team can settle faster to the environment might have the edge, and it's a hard one to call, but if I'm forced to pick, I would probably lean towards G2, as some of their staff and players have won some of the biggest things Siege has to offer, so can help instill this in the newer players on the roster, and I just feel like there is something going for this G2 roster this stage. They feel rejuvenated and are not trying to recreate the previous G2 legacy, but instead build their own one. Along with the fact that DZ have been in many overtime games where a few kills could have led them to lose the match against some of the lower rated teams, G2 overall have just convinced me more that they have what it takes to get a victory over the line. So NIP and G2 are the 2 preceding teams for me. And finally Group D, in what many are calling the Group of Death. Kicking off with Team Liquid, and they've been in great form as of recent. A first place in stage 1 of the Copper Elite 6, a close second place finish to NIP at the Invitational, making them the number 2 team ranked in the world, and an acceptable third place in stage 2's Copper Elite 6, being knocked out by NIP, who won the whole tournament the last 2 times they've faced. This puts them in good stead for this tournament, as they have overall been the ones to push NIP to the limit throughout this season. Liquid and the players on this roster are more than familiar with playing at LAN and against international competition, so I don't see that being a problem for them at this major whatsoever. They have however been slightly inconsistent since the Invitational, with big losses such as a 7-8 loss to Santos and a 1-7 loss to NIP, so with them being in the same group as TSM and a top of the table Empire, they will need to show that consistency that they are capable of, not to be left behind in the group stages. Team Empire. Empire this stage have really brought a smile to my face, and talking of majors, they went from a second place finish at SI 2019, Pro League Finals win and major win all in the same year, but similar to G2, seemed to really fall off the pace in the following years. Outside of an EU domestic major win in 2020, they were nowhere near the level of what fans knew they were capable of. Even in stage 1 of this season, they really struggled, finishing 9th, and heading into SI 2021, there wasn't much expectation, but playing on 1 ping seemed to light them up, as Joystick specifically played at one of the best levels we've seen out of him, period, with him having the most kills and being the undeniable MVP of the group stage. They didn't make it much further in the playoffs, but there was now a rejuvenated hope that these players can still play at the top of their game. Things didn't start well for them in stage 2, being whitewashed by BDS 07 in Playday 1, then losing in overtime the next Playday to Unknights, but they dusted themselves off and since then, in a very inconsistent league, have managed to collect victories in every game till the end of the stage, only being forced to overtime once against their long-standing rivals G2, which they were still able to come out on top of. So the question for me really is this just a burst of form, or have they really found a way to consistently play at the level we've seen from them in previous years? Who knows? But what I do know is that, like many successful teams around the world, they have stuck together as a roster, making minimal changes, having faith that they have all it takes with the current 5 players they have to be a powerhouse in Siege once again. Onto TSM, and this is an interesting team for me. By far one of my favourite teams to watch, with Charlotte being one of my favourite players across any region, along with 4 other extremely talented players. And this team undoubtedly do have what it takes with the current 5 players to be a championship winning team. They already secured a DreamHack win against Liquid with 3 of the 5 players currently on the roster. And arguably the 2 changed players since then are an overall upgrade. Since then, they've come close a few times, finishing 3rd and 4th at the last 2 invitationals respectively. But at those last few hurdles have been unable to find the victory victory to make it to the finals. Outside of SSG, they have looked like the most dominant team in NAL this stage, represented in a second place finish in the split just gone, and because of this, I have faith in them making a good tournament run. I just love the versatility of a team like TSM, as they are often one of the teams to try and break the mold and the meta of the past and venture out into new operators, maps and strats. This is a benefit to them, especially at the moment with all the small changes to operators, gadgets and gun recoil. And they are not slouches either when it comes to strategy, and like a few of the other teams mentioned, have stuck together for a while, meaning they understand how to work off each other and what type of plays their teammates are likely to make. You can see on many different occasions, from streams to post-match interviews, how much love these players have for each other and how much they enjoy playing together, even just in ranked. Therefore, I think there shouldn't be anything in their minds that stops them from having the belief that they can make it all the way to the finals and come out victorious. Invictus. Honestly, I haven't watched much of this ex-Giants roster this season, but they have undoubtedly drawn the short straw when it comes to this tournament, with a tough challenge ahead of them to overcome 2 of these 4 teams in their group. They finished second in the APAC playoffs, winning the lower bracket and should be in a good mindset heading into this tournament, but honestly I think the only way they make it out of this group is if they try not to think too hard about the teams and players they are facing. If they think too hard about players like Bolo, Nesk and Joystick, they will be mentally ruined every time they die in the game and will be heading home early. But if they try to focus on their fundamentals and mid-game adaptability, then you never know, maybe they will shock the world. I don't see this happening however, as I just don't think they'll be able to pull off 2 big upsets like that, maybe 1 at most but not 2 to be able to knock out 2 other teams. So they for me will be heading home. I think Liquid will make it through, as some of their big players like Nesk are firing at the moment, leaving it down to TSM and Empire. And as much as I would like to see them make it to at least the semis, I don't think Empire will be able to take out TSM from those qualifying spots. We will need not only Joystick, but the rest of the Empire roster to have some of the best games of their lives. And if Shepard isn't able to have as much success with plants and objective play as he has in EUL this stage, then I just don't see them being able to have enough to defeat TSM, where it often feels like every player is their own little boss to defeat. If it isn't Charla, then it's Bolo. If it isn't Bolo, then it's Achieved and Geo making impact plays, and an informed Merc is by far one of the most deadly entry players in the world. So for me, TSM will secure that playoff spot along with Team Liquid. Now, with every team gone over and which teams I think will make it out of their groups, let's head into something that is very stupid to try, but honestly I don't really care, and that would be my prediction of who's going to win it all. This is such a hard call to make, and it's kind of illogical as there's no clear favourite. This tournament to me is likely to be way more competitive than SI, as many regions' big hitters have returned to top form, and I expect everyone would have learned a lot from what Brazil had to show at that event. But forcing a pick, I would still say the highest percentage lies with Ninjas in Pyjamas. A big part of this is their Copa Elite 6 win a few weeks ago, showing they are still hungry for victory and want more than just one international title. Many teams here could take them down, but I feel with the form they are in, there is no excuses for them to not finish the top of their group against DZ and G2, as long as they are aware of the counter strats that these 2 teams could bring. From there on out, it's a bit more of a roll of a dice, but the Copa Elite 6 win has proven to me that they are still at the top of their game, so Ninjas in Pyjamas are favourites for me to bring another title back to Brazil. This was actually a really fun video to write and a really fun video to record, to be honest. It's just even more gets me in the mood for this tournament. Drop down in the comments below not only which teams you think are going to make it through, but which team do you think has the best chance of taking it all? As I said, it's really hard to call and I don't think there's any clear favourite, but yeah, I've given my opinion. Hit a like if you enjoyed, drop a subscribe if you want to see more similar content to this on your timeline, but most of all, enjoy the major, as I know we are in store for some great competition and are likely going to see an even closer tournament than we did at the Invitational. Good luck to whichever team you support, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.